I remember one night they actually got some gangsters to try and take Ludwig out.
Oh, wow.
And Ludwig couldn't come out of the locker room, and he was they had to get the police there to try and help Ludwig to escort.
Right, guys, welcome to the first episode of the Hack Check podcast. We're here at Reps MMA. The man to my left is known to me, known to many people, I think in the MMA community, in the Jiu-Jitsu community, and some of you may not know him, so I'll introduce him to you. He's former Undefeated heavyweight champion, former EFC World Heavyweight Champion, second Dan Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, head coach and owner at Reps MMA. My coach and good friend, Rico Hattingh. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. I know you're busy. We've had at the gym today. You guys just had the kids grading, I believe.
Grading, yes. So it's normally we do it every quarter, and this was the end of the second quarter grading that we just did with the kids now. So we've got a beginner class as well as an advanced class, and we did the beginner class first and the advanced class after that. So those advanced class kids are really good. They're on a super high level already. So.
No, definitely. Yeah. Last week I was actually, so we've got an open mat running in the background. You might be able to hear it, which is every Saturday as well.
Every Saturday, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And just before the open mat last week, I was actually looking at those kids rolling, and I mean, it's insane the level that they're already at.
Absolutely.
At such a young age.
Yes.
I think, especially if you know, I started a year ago here, and I think some of them are on a much higher level than I am already technically, and just, you know, calmness when they roll. It's crazy to see.
Yeah, look, we didn't have that really. I mean, I'm 41 now. When I was young, you know, you had your wrestling, especially in the northern suburbs. You had your wrestling and you had your karate and your judo, but nothing like this. No MMA, no Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu like we have it today, with all these fancy bells and whistles techniques that you get. So yeah, I mean, these kids are really privileged to be able to do that at this age, you know. And like you say, you've been training for a year and you saw these kids. Some of these kids, the advanced kids, have been with me for 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and but I've got a really good coaching team. It's not only me coaching them, you know. I've got Juan Hubert who's coaching them, who's like a really good coach. And but yeah, I think, you know, it's always, one always think that these kids are going to stay small, but you know, before you know it, 2-3 years, and then they're adults already, you know.
Yeah.
And then that's the new guys coming through now. You know what I mean? We've got so it's new to us in South Africa, this whole thing. Not new, but fairly new compared to the rest of the world. You know, but in 5 years' time, 5-6 years' time, you're going to see a massive increase of, you know, I think we'll be at the level of the other countries, you know, like Europe and America and stuff.
Most definitely. I think South Africa is one of the last sort of, I don't want to say untapped markets in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but it is one of the last sort of places where people start Jiu-Jitsu, MMA, you know, wrestling not so much, but we've had judo for a long time as a sport. You know, we're known for our rugby, our cricket and those sports, but I think Jiu-Jitsu, MMA, you know, these kids are probably choosing this as their sport from a very young age.
Yes. And also, like you say, with the rugby, I mean, we're a rugby country, and you know, we've got really good talent. We've got these, especially in the northern suburbs, where you used to have the wrestling. The wrestling is dying out a little bit, which is actually sad to see, because I used to wrestle as well, and wrestling is very good for kids, you know.
Why would you say it's dying out?
I think it's dying out a bit because the last time I saw, we had like a lot of adults training at the wrestling club. I'm talking back when I was training there, 2003, 2004, 2005. And if I look at the two clubs that's now still exist, you know, I think I didn't see a lot of adults there anymore. And I've heard rumors from the coaches that the wrestling is dying out a little bit. And judo also, in a way, because we had one pioneer in judo called Jan, and I think he retired when COVID hit. And you know, so myself and Gerard, we used to run Alpha. He was coaching at Van der Stel Sports Center,
yeah,
and he was coaching the judo there. But when Wim Jan actually retired, everything stopped. We not stopped. I think it's still carrying on, but it's not as big as it used to be.
But we still, South Africa still has decent wrestlers that actually make it to the top, don't we?
Yeah, I think in Alberton and those places, but in Cape Town, it's there's a lot of kids that's still doing wrestling, and I'm actually friends with a coach that used to coach me that time in Brackenfell, Gertjie van der Merwe, and he's actually handed over a few years ago to a guy called Steven Achenbach, and he's actually now running it. So I'm actually going to meet with Steven to see if we can maybe work together, because I feel that yes, there's a lot of jiu-jitsu clubs and MMA clubs opening now, and it is the new thing. If I can call it, nothing against any other martial arts, but it's the new karate, like when we were young.
That's exactly, And I know what you mean.
And and the kids can grade internationally, so they can actually get their belt and go overseas. Parents immigrate or whatever they want to do, travel. They can train with that belt. Similar fashion that you can do with judo and karate and that sort of thing. But yeah, I'd like to see wrestling, because I also come from a wrestling background. I'd like to see wrestling, happening a little bit more often and growing again, and maybe working together with the jiu-jitsu.
No, for sure.
And because at the end of the day, if you look at judo is a watered down version of Brazilian jiu-jitsu, more the sport version. Judo is really, really good as well. But in judo, you don't have all the leg locks and all those things. They've removed a lot of stuff for the Olympics. But wrestling to me is a very, very tough sport.
No, for sure.
But in wrestling also, you've got some bad habits for jiu-jitsu tournaments. So if you're a good wrestler, you can do good takedowns, whether it's your freestyle or your Greco-Roman. You can do good takedowns, but once you're on the ground, a wrestler wants to turn his back.
Doesn't want to be on his back
to the person, and the person that's on top of the wrestler that's turning his back cannot do the choke and those things in wrestling. So that is one bad habit that I've seen, that good wrestlers, when they're under pressure, they turn their back. And also with judos, because judokas. Because with judokas, very good judokas, black belts, they're good, but they train a lot of these, these arm throws where they turn.
Yeah.
And they get caught eventually. If they don't get the throw, they can't execute it, and the jiu-jitsu practitioner normally, not only jiu-jitsu but other judo guys as well, catch them in the rear naked choke or take their back. And I've seen similar with the wrestling as well. So yeah, I think we're at a good place in South Africa at this stage with the kids and where we're going at and that sort of thing. But yeah, I'd like to see, especially in Cape Town and the northern suburbs, the wrestling flare up a little bit again and work together with the jiu-jitsu, because wrestling is really good.
Yeah, and I think especially if you're going to be doing MMA, which, even when I was younger, that was like the next big sport, and I don't think we're there yet where people are having that. We said earlier people are choosing that as their sport, but it still doesn't have, per se, the mass adoption. I know the UFC is massive, and it's one of the biggest sports in the world, but I think, from a grappling standpoint, and then transitioning through to MMA, obviously the more you know, the better.
Yes.
You see it all the time with wrestlers that go to grappling competitions, even a jiu-jitsu competition, and they're very dominant.
Yes.
And they can and they can, even to a blue belt level, be dominant over some blue belts.
Yes.
So it's definitely something that's, if you can incorporate everything together, that's golden right there.
So what I've always said to my students, and what I've, through the years of my experience with wrestling and MMA especially, no-gi and that sort of thing, is I always say, if you take a fight and you take two guys, and I put two guys, I say one guy stand here, another guy stand here, I say, okay, if this guy is like a good ground fighter, he's like the best ground fighter in the world, and the guy he's fighting is the best stand-up fighter in the world, and then I ask the guys in class, I say, which one do you think will do the best in a fight?
Oh.
The best ground fighter or the best stand-up fighter? And then I get answers, stand-up, ground, stand-up. And then I say, okay, but let's look at something. let's take the actual ground fighter, that's the best in the world. He's now fighting the stand-up fighter. What does he need to do to that stand-up fighter in order to display his ground skills?
Get it to the ground.
He needs to take him down. Let's take it the other way around now. So the stand-up fighter, what does he need to do in order to display his stand-up skills?
Stop a
He
takedown.
needs to stop the takedown.
Correct, yeah.
So at the end of the day, to me, the most important thing in a fight, yes, those stand-up and ground is super important, but the most important thing in an MMA fight and controlling the distance is if you can do a takedown, if you can stop a takedown. So if you're a very extremely good wrestler, you can actually fight wherever you want to fight.
Dictate where
You
it
can
needs to go.
dictate. You can go in and you can stop a takedown. And if you feel like, okay, this guy's like really good in his stand-up, and I can take him down, you know. And if I feel that the guy's very good on the ground, I can stop him. I can keep him standing. So from there, from that baseline, I can then say, okay, learn the stand-up, learn the ground, learn the submission defenses. So yes, your wrestlers, when they do competitions, they normally win. Most of them when there's points involved. You know, but with those competitions where you've got submission only, they look good, but they're not really scoring points with the takedowns. And normally, if they're not very good yet, but they're very good in wrestling, but they're not very good yet in jiu-jitsu, they get caught because they either turn their back, you know, from a habit, or their hips is quite high as well in wrestling.
Yep.
So it's easy to get the guard and to get
With
arm
space.
bars, and not easy to get sweeps because they got a strong base, but to arm bar them and leg lock them and that sort of thing. But for them to adapt to that, they just need to learn how to defend against those leg locks. And if I can use a very, very good example, is that Hanku Strijdom
Yes.
from Eduan's gym.
Sorry, before we carry on, so just for everybody, we had a competition, which was about 2 or 3 weekends ago.
Yes.
And we had submission-only style for the higher belts. And in the higher belts, I think everyone is a brown belt besides Fani was a purple belt, and Hanku was a white belt.
Yeah.
So just for a little bit of context on what we're
Yes.
talking about.
Yeah, so with that being said, you know, you're getting these good wrestlers, or he's like maybe he's got Springbok colors, I don't know.
I think he does, yes. Yeah.
But now he's never done jiu-jitsu before, so he walks in as a white belt, which is actually people go, but how can? But you see, he's not jiu-jitsu, but
The grappling aspect.
that grappling aspect, and that's why I say that's why I'd like to get the wrestling involved a little bit more, because I can see how it's going to help, and regardless of you can't make the guy a brown belt or black belt because he's a Springbok wrestler. You know, when in the MMA, on the MMA board, I remember they used to say that if somebody if you had national colors in boxing, or you had in wrestling or kickboxing, whatever the case may be, he couldn't fight as an amateur. He has to fight as a pro. I remember there was a rule. I'm not sure if it's like that still, but this is now something similar to the white belt. You see, the white belt now enters into a white belt tournament against complete beginners who's starting, just never done wrestling.
Yeah, and it's point based.
And it's point based. And so this wrestler just runs through everybody. You know what I mean? And that's why I say, you know, if I go back to that example, is that the takedown and the takedown defense is crucial.
No, 100%. I remember when you still had the gym in Voortrekker Road, I was fortunate enough to go to 1 or 2 open mats, because we had Nathan do the MMA in Stellenbosch when I was still studying there. And you know, speaking to people, obviously, actually even before that, I even saw you at a few other competitions. That's probably a better example is your ability to actually dictate where the fight goes. Because I remember you know, as a blue belt, tapping out a lot of brown belts, and one of the guys was actually a blue belt, but he just got his brown belt after that, so he was a brown belt level.
Yes.
And I mean, I couldn't even imagine myself, let's say getting to blue belt, tapping a high level brown belt. I mean, it's something, and that's just down to your ability to control the fights, and of course technique. So I'm not obviously ruling that out. But I think that's something you were also great at in your MMA career as well. The videos that I've seen and some of the fights that I've watched, and I think that's what, to get to your point, what made you so dominant as an MMA fighter.
Yeah, so if you look at the MMA that we've done, you know, if you look at MMA, it's completely the opposite of how can I say, if you do jiu-jitsu you can lie on your back, you can relax, you can even sometimes close your eyes because you can feel what the guy wants to do. But that's not the case in MMA. You know, you've got punches raining down on you. You need to. So yes, jiu-jitsu for MMA is different than just jiu-jitsu, and wrestling for MMA is different, because I used to train with Randy Couture and those guys in 2005, and they had also Dan Henderson in 2008, and they had a very good understanding of wrestling for MMA, not just wrestling because of wrestling. They understood the bad habits and so on. And I was also very fortunate to have met a coach in my life, Ludwig Strydom, who was actually my MMA coach, who helped me a lot with the understanding of movement for fighting. You know, because his way or his thing was to say principle before technique, and that's the answer to all your questions. And so, you know, if you understand the principle, you don't need to, and I'm talking principle of movement, you understand how the body moves, half the stuff is already sorted. If you have to start from scratch and you don't know anything, you go watch YouTube. You see all these fancy techniques, but you look at the end game, you look at when the guy taps, you look at the submissions, but you don't look at how the body moved in order and controlled in order to get to the submission. So he coached us. You know, obviously I had the wrestling part as well, and the dominance and that sort of thing. But he coached us to make sure that we could control somebody before we go for the submission, go for the kill. And that was something that he put a lot of emphasis on. I mean, I remember when I started in '99 with him, I started in Health and Racket in one city. Yeah. And I remember the first time I heard about Ludwig Strydom, and I heard, you know, he's very good, because he trained with Hickson Gracie in 1997 already. And then he came back and he taught all these arm bars, and nobody at that stage in South Africa knew this. And, you know, I actually went there and I saw two studios next to each other. But the one studio was like packed with guys. Packed. I mean, everybody was standing, kicking and punching. And the studio next to it, I saw 6 or 7 guys sitting on a mat, sitting and explaining something and that sort of thing. And obviously I was attracted to these big group standing, and they were like punching and
the flashy stuff you probably saw in movies at the time.
And I'm not going to say who the academy was, but I mean, you know, I thought, and I went in there and I was like asking guys, is this Ludwig's? Because I'm looking for Ludwig. And they were laughing at me. And I was like, and then one said, I think it's next door, eh? And then I was like, what? And then I walked out, I walked next door, and I got in, and Ludwig looked at me and he says, I said, I'm Rico, I've heard of you and I want to start training. And he said, well, take your shoes off and come on the mat. And from that day onwards, then I realized this small little group that nobody even realized there was the most dangerous group, because I had, like, a guy who was 55 kilograms, Arthur Stevens, his name was. He was actually in school with me in HTS Belleville. And this guy played with me. Now, I was very strong when I was young. At that time, I was doing weightlifting and I did wrestling, and I was, you know, I was really strong. But I didn't know these arm bars and those things, you know, like I explained to you earlier, with the wrestlers getting caught and the strong guys. And I saw this Arthur, and I was like, are you training here? I remember at school you were like, people say you were doing martial arts. I thought you were doing karate. He says, no, I'm training here. And I remember going against him, and while wrestling against him, I remember him talking to me, and he was at the bottom. Now, this to me was like
foreign,
mind-boggling, because I was like, I'm on top of you.
Dominant.
I'm dominant, I'm strong, but you're so relaxed and supple, and you talking to me, saying that I'm going to catch you in this technique, and I'm going to count down from 10 to 5 or 5 to 1. And he started catching me with techniques I've never seen in my life. He started catching me with arm bars, triangles.
From the bottom.
From the bottom.
And he weighs half what you weigh.
Yes. But he was like seriously good. He was like training for years. He was, you know, really strong, flexible, following Ludwig's program. And that was the day when I realized, obviously I looked at him with different eyes the next time I saw him at school. But that was when I walked out of that gym, not the gym, the studio. When I walked out of that, I realized that, you know, I'm strong, I'm good, but I need to learn this. And this is not about strength. these techniques are really, really good. And then obviously when I started learning them and started executing them, but Ludwig's way, not just going for the kill, trying to control, yes, even if you're on your back, having your legs around the person, keeping your guard, keeping the control, of course you've got 4 points, he's got 2.
Mm-hmm.
So, limbs actually, not points. So that was actually something that was really mind-boggling to me. And when I started getting good with that, then I realized that, where I come from, what I used to do, the wrestling and the strength, and they say, you don't need strength and size, but it does help if you know.
No, of course it does. No.
So
I
then
think that's
I
a
realized,
myth.
I realized this was it, and I need to learn this, and I need to get into this, and I really got into it very fast. Actually, I mean, it was 2 years, and I was fighting for him.
Wow.
But that time, you must remember, there wasn't any,
there was no one established that you could do,
nothing.
no
Nobody
organizations.
checked your gloves, no organizations. There wasn't any proper rules. I remember Ludwig said to me, "There's a guy in PE. He said he wants to fight you, and he says he's cool if you cool with biting." And I'm like,
Oh my
ways."
goodness! Wow.
And the rounds was 10 minutes. My first fight was in UPE, University of PE, 2001. It was Chris Bright's tournament.
Yeah.
Because Chris Bright also used to train with Ludwig.
Yeah, way back. Yeah.
Yes, and then he invited us over to come and fight there. It was called No Rules Fighting #1 or something like that. It was like an event with a Hickson Gracie poster on. And
but were they actually? I mean, what were the rules? I mean, what you get there, and then they say to you, okay, listen, this is basically what you can and can't do.
Yes.
What were you not allowed to do?
I'll tell you what was not allowed. The only thing that was not allowed was biting, and I think headbutting wasn't allowed.
So hair pulling,
no,
okay.
Hair pulling wasn't allowed.
Groin strikes?
No, that wasn't
Okay.
allowed. Because I think Chris was trying to get things, he was checking what was happening in overseas and how the guys were doing it. But there was definitely talks about that, like, do you want to do this, or you agree on that, ask your coach, and then we were like, no, okay. But, you could soccer kick somebody on the ground, you could grab
This is before the unified rules, so
Yeah.
pride was still a thing. So you could probably slam somebody, spike them. Wow.
I remember Vian Lesh fighting he fought in Dockside at one time, and he fought a guy called Shahid Hanif, which was also one of Ludwig's students at the time. And Vian just shot him, picked him up. Shahid jumped guard, I think. And Vian slammed him. I remember that sound, and it was. I just remember those years they used boxing rings for us to fight in MMA. No fifth rope, no soft. It was hard. I remember it felt like standing on tables with a tablecloth over it.
I know.
4 tables like going like this. It was really, really, and so he slammed him. I remember the sound from the backstage. It was like everybody was like, "What?" And then I said, Vian just knocked Shahid out with a slam. Yeah, because Vian was also like, Vian's good in wrestling.
Yeah, he's scary.
Yeah.
He probably still is. I mean, he was,
Yeah, so that was, I'm talking 2003, 2002.
How many people were at these fights, or what was the kind of like, what was the setting? You said it's a boxing ring. Was there a crowd at all? Were there people watching? What does it look like?
So actually, if I can tell you, it was actually, it's not as big as today, but it wasn't far off.
Oh yeah?
It was actually very popular. People would come and stream to watch this. I remember when we fought at Dockside, the whole Dockside was packed.
Really?
Packed of people, and I think people were still queuing.
Wow.
And so it was really, really, from that time, it was something that people wanted to see. I remember when the UFC started in its early days, there was this one guy, I can't remember if it's a Gracie guy or somebody, who said that fighting, they didn't say MMA that time, they said fighting will be bigger than soccer one day. And then I also remember Forrest Griffin in his book said something about, you can take all the sports in the world, every single sport, from soccer to hockey to rugby, whatever the case may be. And if you put them all in one, like,
in a line,
and you have them, guys playing rugby here, doing this, let there be one fight, and everybody's
people will be drawn. Yeah.
Everybody's watching.
Yeah.
Remember at school?
Yes.
In break time, if there was like Barney or fight,
Yeah.
everybody would stream and look and make a circle.
Big circle. Yeah.
So fighting is massive.
Yes.
And that, it will always pull a lot of people. So yes, there was a lot of people, but the people were uneducated.
So they was, I can imagine, yes.
Yeah, so they didn't. So for example, when I fought, I think I fought Vian, and I went for a leg lock. The people were thinking, but Vian's on top of me. Why isn't he winning? You know what I mean? It's like what I thought before I rolled with Arthur.
Yeah.
When I met Ludwig, and people were like, yeah, but. And then I tapped him with a knee bar, I think.
People
and
are confused.
Like, what?
Yeah.
What happened there? Are you joking?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So there was no punches involved or whatever,
And it's like, in Afrikaans, they said, Murom, that's all they
Exactly.
would say.
Yeah.
But nowadays, you could see the people are educated, the kids, it's starting obviously from grassroots level, and you can see that when they watch the fights with their parents or on TV or on Facebook, everybody's on Facebook and social media, you see it, they follow it, so they get those notifications. They can actually see and they can relate to, because they're doing jiu-jitsu, so they can see, that's the guard, that's the arm bar.
Takedowns are important.
Yes.
Where I remember when I started watching UFC, Tito Ortiz was the light heavyweight champion, and I had a friend who was more knowledgeable than I was, and I thought the whole time, I was like, but this is stupid, why is he taking him down?
Yes.
But it's the most effective. Now you look at people praising Habib, who's amazing, but it's a similar blueprint to what Tito Ortiz did. The difference is 12 or 14 years ago, people were booing, and now people are cheering for every single takedown.
Exactly. It's exactly the same thing. And that's why I believe it will stay. Even if you look at the new leg lock thing that's been happening since, I think, 2019, 18, 19, with John Banner and those, the guys are very good with the leg locks now, and Gordon Ryan and everything. But I believe it's going to evolve again. People are going to sort of evolve in a way that they defend that and work back up in a way, to standing position, to wrestling, back to wrestling, or because there's always like these cycles, it evolves. And yes, leg locks is like super dangerous and that sort of thing, but I don't think I think people are going to get into a thing where they don't fight the leg locks. They're maybe going to try and defend and, or stand up, and the fight's going to go back up, or that's just my thinking. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm completely wrong, but that's it's an evolution, and your wrestling and your takedowns and your control on the ground and that sort of thing will always, in my opinion, be
number one.
I remember even now when I roll with guys, I try to control. I try to stay out of the guard. I try and stay on top. If I'm not on top, I try to keep the guard or escape. But it's so easy to actually do a submission if you can control the guy for a long period of time. You control him super tight. He can't get guard on you. You're in side control. You're in mount. You go from mount to side. Even if you don't get that, the points-based system, you'll win. Similar to the wrestling, it just makes sense to do that, and for beginners as well. And that's why beginner competitions have the points. You need to have the beginner guys understand the takedowns, understand the guard pass, because you're going to get a reward for it.
Yeah.
Once you like super level, then you can do submission only and that sort of thing. But to start beginners off in submission only, I think it's pointless, because they won't learn. Unless they. Yeah, this is from a competition point of view. It's super important that they learn. There must be a takedown. There must be. But if you come up against a Springbok wrestler that's a white belt, it's a problem,
Yeah, for sure.
then you wish for your submission.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a different feeling.
Yeah.
I just want to get back to you meeting Ludwig. So where did you hear about Ludwig? Because obviously it was a time where there was no social media, no WhatsApp. MMA gyms must have been like these mythical, MMA and jiu-jitsu gyms must have been these mythical places you only heard about every now and then. Like with your friend, he did some martial arts, but you didn't know what it was. Where did you meet him? He was obviously established at the time. You said he met the Gracies in the 70s. So did he grade and then open up his own thing, or what was the background with Ludwig?
Yeah, so what happened, where I met, or the way I actually was introduced to Ludwig was, I was a bouncer, and when I left school, there was a bouncing company, friends, and I seriously did it for the money, not to fight. A lot of people think, why are you bouncing? Because you want to fight people. No, I was actually called the cooler because I wasn't fighting, and people used to to ask me to go and
Cool the situation down. That's
I'm
pretty
not really
cool.
a fighter, but I was doing it for the money.
Yeah.
And I got pulled in because that was the thing that time, And I remember the guy said, we're going to have training sessions, and if you want extra training sessions, you must see if you can go to Ludwig. And I was like, who is Ludwig? And then I went to these trainings, not with Ludwig, to the bouncer trainings, and we used to roll with each other, and I knew nothing. And nobody really coached because they were... And then there was one guy, Joe Seeley. I remember we went to train, because he was also an old school bouncer. We went to train on his farm out in Klipjebel. And then he saw something in me. He says, Rico, I see you want to, you're good and you want to achieve something here. Let's get you to Ludwig. I was like, okay, finally I'm going to meet Ludwig. And that's how he told me where he trained, and that's how I actually went to, to the N1 City Health and Racket, and I found out where he was training, and so that's the way I met Ludwig. But Ludwig, then I discovered that he was training in 1997 with Hicks and Gracie. He went over and he did 6 weeks of private training with him, and he learned so much. He said it was through the roof, what he learned with Hickson. And Hickson's son, the one who passed away, was still young, and they were still rolling with
Carlson?
each other. I think it was, I can't actually remember 100% his name, but I think he passed away in New York. I can't remember the name, but it was his son that passed away. But that time, I mean, he was young, and Hickson would say, roll with Ludwig, and there wasn't a lot of people that went to Hickson that time, because it was 1997, it was before UFC still, and that sort of thing. So Ludwig, when he came to South Africa with all those skills, and he started with a small group. I remember going out and people asked, what do you do? And I was like, what sport do you do, whatever. And I was like, I can't really say that I'm a cage fighter, because and they wouldn't understand it, and they would think so I was like, I'm doing this fighting, and they were like, what type of fighting? Underground. And I was like, no. You know what I'm doing? I'm doing boxing and wrestling. Now we know what you do.
Yeah.
So I couldn't tell them I was doing MMA, the
they
word
wouldn't
didn't
understand.
exist at the time, and UFC didn't exist, EFC didn't exist, so it was NHB, no holds barred, but you can't explain that to people. You can sit the whole night try and explain to them. So I was like, no, I'm doing wrestling and boxing. Oh, okay, cool, now we understand what you're doing. Today it's it's a different story. I'm
Everybody knows.
Degree, I'm MMA oh wow, MMA, UFC, it's all on. So with regards, coming back to Ludwig, the skills he brought to South Africa and to us, we were so privileged. I remember there was fights at that time, like the one that they wanted to negotiate for biting, and Chris Bright's ones that were in PE. I remember there was also in Johannesburg a guy. So he had fighters competing and fighting in this guy's event, but there was no medic. It was really, and I remember also Ludwig's guys beating most of these guys and these guys. And I remember one night they actually got some gangsters to try and take Ludwig out.
Oh wow!
And Ludwig couldn't come out of the locker room, and he was. They had to get the police there to try and help Ludwig to escort him out.
But did he barricade himself in, or how? Or were they just?
They were waiting for him outside, apparently with batons. And, but this was
because his guys beat all. Wow.
Yeah.
Sure.
Maybe not directly, but he was friends with these gangsters, and that's what I've heard that time. And that actually, I could remember Ludwig wasn't a guy like that. He wasn't a bad guy. He was a guy that loved the art, and when that happened, he said, I'm not doing it anymore, I'm not going to take guys to those fights and things like that. So but his skills were out of this world. I'm telling you, in 2 years, like I trained 2000, 2001, I started beating guys. But now remember, it's not that time you had your boxers that you fight, or your wrestlers.
It was a style versus a style almost, yeah.
And then obviously, with the skills he taught us, you could literally take anybody down, mount them, and armbar them. They would not know what you're doing or take their back. They would just turn their back. But obviously it evolved over time, and people started learning. We didn't have proper black belts coming over. Ludwig was like black belt pass, he was like,
how many black belts were there when you started?
When
Give or
I
take.
started, there was no black belts in that time. I mean, it was Ludwig. Ludwig didn't. There was no lineage. There was no. It was too. It was too young. You know, it was too early days. It was no. So I remember grading under a guy called Paulo Cesar. I used to call him Drive-In. Small little Brazilian guy, and he came to South Africa and he stayed in Cape Town. I think Jason or Kurt or Jacques Portelli got him out, and we went there and we trained in the Tilbach Center with him. And he was a black belt, but he was a very big kids coach in Brazil. He had like massive amounts of kids that he was coaching, big academies. And he stayed there. He couldn't talk English.
Oh, no.
And he gave me my blue belt. And I remember also my fight name, White Lion. I went to PE where Carlson, where we had that. It's 2006. Do you remember?
Yeah, 6 or 7, I think. Yeah, somewhere around there. The Carlson Gracie Africa Cup.
Yes. And I fought Chris, I fought Dave Levy, I fought that guy from Marcos Suarez, that
purple belt, I think, yes.
He was like, and I mean, I thought it was a guy from Pretoria or something until I shook hands with him, started fighting, and I heard the American accent. I was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, well, you know, and then I beat him on points. And I remember winning that whole tournament, taking absolutes in.
I remember that as well.
All the medals.
Yeah.
And then that evening we went to the place where we stayed, the Backpackers Inn, and there was like this little kitchenette there, and there was this big portrait of a lion, and this Brazilian guy, because he couldn't speak English properly, he pulled me, he stopped me, he said, "You,
This
White Lion."
Yeah.
And the guys were like, okay, Rico, from now on you White Lion, you know?
That's a cool nickname.
Yeah, so that's where the White Lion started, you know, people.
Hey guys, before we go any further with today's video, I'd just like to give a massive shout out to today's title sponsor, Sandown Physiotherapists at Sandown Medical Center. I'm going to leave a link in the description below to their website, their Instagram page, and a contact number. They are open Mondays to Saturdays and selected Sundays for all orthopedic, sport-related, or work-related injuries. That's Sandown Physiotherapists at Sandown Medical Center. Link in the description. Thank you so much.
People think, oh, why do you give yourself a name? Well, it's not me, that it was the Brazilian oak that graded me first, that gave me that. And and then from there, he moved back to Brazil, and, you know, then we had a lot of black belts, not a lot, but here and there was a black belt coming over to South Africa, and everybody would be like raving, wow, there's a black belt coming. Chris would come down, and all the guys, and, you know. And then we would, I think there was once at Barrow's school or something, there was a black belt from Brazil that went there, and he showed us, we were all sitting there and he had mats, but he showed us a guard pass. And we were like, wow, you know, and we know it, but we just wanted the black belt here. And everybody was like, can you not grade me? Can you not? Because we didn't have lineage. We were like falling, we were like kids without parents.
Yeah.
And the guy was like, yeah, you know, and I think he graded somebody. He didn't grade me though, because I was more into the no-D and M. I wasn't worried at that time about gradings. Nobody was. And eventually I met up with Roberto Atala from the Rio Grappling Club. I think that was in 2006, 2005, 2006. I went for a seminar in Johannesburg. His seminar, he had a big seminar, and Vika Swart was under him. Vika Swart actually said to me, because we competed against each other, me and Vika here in Cape Town.
In jiu-jitsu or
jiu-jitsu.
okay?
Yeah, Kianoki, but I was blue belt and he was purple, you know. And he said to me, well, you know, why don't you come up? Roberto's coming down. He's my coach from Brazil. I was like, well, you got somebody that's, you know, like, I mean, I had my coaches, but somebody from Brazil with a lineage.
Exactly.
You know? And he said he can grade you, and, you know, so I mean, today, Vika's his third degree, I'm second degree, you know, and Roberto gave him his third degree. but so I went up to the seminar and I saw this and I was like amazed, and I was like, this guy's really good, and that's where I met with Roberto, and Roberto said to me, do you have anybody in Cape? Or I actually asked him, do you have anybody in Cape Town that that representing the Rio Grappling Club? He says, no, I'm only in Johannesburg, and I'd like to grow it in Cape Town. So that time I was coaching out of my mother's house, the garage, no-gi.
Yeah.
And gi as well, but more no-gi because of the MMA. And so I said, well, I'll be happy to do that for you. And I started, and we got him over. And the nice thing about Roberto was, it's not like the other black belts at the time where it's costing you an arm and a leg. You got to put the guy in a 5-star hotel. He was like, Rico, get some guys together, cover my airline ticket, because I already have guys in Joburg, so we can split it. You just bring me from Joburg to Cape Town, and we can
put me up in a place.
Yeah, and I slept at my mom's house, and he was fine with it. And we went out and we ate something, and I made food at the house, and he was eating. He was fine with it. So, and I started from that time since, and that's how we grew today to one of the biggest organizations in South Africa and in Cape Town, definitely.
Rio.
Rio,
yeah.
Of course, we're huge, and so yeah, it was a nice journey, up until now, and it had to be done, this lineage, because of what happened with CJA, and you remember that.
I'm not so familiar, but I've heard a few stories about it. Yeah.
So I've got no problem with CJA guys. They good fighters and good grapplers, but I think and they're nice guys. But I think what they did pissed off a lot of people in the BJJ community, and they.
Are they still around? Sorry.
I've got no idea.
Okay.
I still see a lot of them training, and they've opened some gyms like Brian Mathieson and Josh Mathieson. They were under CJA, so they now open their gym. Michael Block, obviously, who's training here with us, and and a few guys, Michael Mel, they were all under. So I'm not actually sure if they, but it was predominantly no gi. There was no, they didn't do any gi at all, because maybe they did, but they couldn't really. It's like, who's your lineage? Now I'm graded by a guy in Durbanville, and so where's the Gracie tree? How does it fit in with Gracie Jiu-Jitsu? How people are.
Yeah, the original lineage.
Yeah, so what they did was they went and apparently, from what I've seen, they went and they got an online grading under Hickson, because Hickson opened up this portal where you can actually. But when people saw that, and they were like, but hang on, there's guys who's like 21 years old, I think it was his son, he's got a 2nd degree under Hickson Gracie, online overnight.
Wow.
And no gi. And everybody's like, and the whole community was like making groups and saying, guys, what's happening here? And I tried to stay out of it as much as I could, because I'm like, guys, I'm not worried about these things. I know these guys, they're nice guys. They're not bad in rolling, but because of the fact that they did that, I think, and that's why I think it's so important to also have, because I could have also walked that path, and just with Ludwig, good in rolling, my guys are good in rolling, but I had to get that lineage for my gym and for my guys to say, okay, we are falling under an international organization, internationally recognized, IBJJF. So nobody can say, you're just giving belts, or you this and that and the other, you know what I mean? So it's legitimate.
Yes.
It's in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you've got a guy from Brazil, he graded under Enzo Gracie, then he split off and he opened his own academy, but he still has a master that grades him, that's directly related to
it's a proper lineage,
it's a lineage,
all the way
so
through.
You can see, and that's what people want, and I think that's where the whole thing of gi and no gi, and but people joke about it, and say, okay, I'm like Gordon Ryan's graded to purple and then brown, but the guys, you know what I mean. So
what's that guy from UFC? Chimaev was a white belt for the longest time, but smashing guys.
So because of myself as well, I did MMA fights and everything, so that that's also a factor that plays a role when you get graded. People say, okay, you're not just doing jiu-jitsu. If you're a black belt, it doesn't mean that you're going to smash everybody. It's maybe you run your own school, maybe you've put in a lot of time back into the sport, maybe you've done MMA tournaments, so there's a lot of factors that play a role in grading, especially with us in the Rio Grappling Club, other than
how good you roll.
You know what I mean? I mean, you know that age plays a role and things like that, and genetics, and so I mean, I can be a second degree and I can have a Hanku beating me in because he's a wrestler and he's a white belt. He's positional and he is 20 years old or 21 years old, and I'm 41. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But 20 years ago it would be a different story. So the age thing, and so it's more about, it's all those factors that play a role. You know, it's not necessarily you, but why haven't you been a world champion or?
100%.
So it does help.
Yeah.
But yeah.
When when did you get your black belt? I believe, and I think you were the first Dan black belt, or were you the first black belt in Cape Town?
Yeah. So what happened was, it was I think it was in the beginning of 2012. Roberto gave me my black belt, and I was the first black belt in Cape Town.
Wow.
Yeah. There was a black belts in Johannesburg. I think it was Rico Swart. And but yeah, definitely the first. I remember they made an article in the Tiger Burger as well.
I saw that. Yes.
Black belt in Cape Town.
And it was here at this gym, eh?
No. That was the article that was in the Paro gym where I used to be. We did. That's when I got graded in 2012. Yeah, I only moved to this gym 2014.
2014.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So. And then obviously I graded, so how it works is when you get your black belt, it normally takes 3 years to get the first dan, another 3 years to get the second dan. From the third dan, it takes 5 years. That's the general rule of thumb, you know, that you have to wait. But so it takes long to get your
to get up of course, yeah.
And but yeah, you know, it's like I say, it's running an academy. It's not just, you know, I'm paying
going and smashing
and
people,
and I'm smashing people, and I go to this academy or I don't go. I'm running in the academy. I must be involved. You see, so that's the reason also why we have the HQ Rio Grappling and why guys. But it's also nice. It's not a lot of red tape to have Rio Grappling. That's what was nice. You know, I know it's maybe not like, you know, we don't do big things and stuff like that, but it's a way to get your recognized grading without costing you an arm and a leg. You know what I mean? And it's still legitimate. So
and not everybody's doing jiu-jitsu for competitions and flashy stuff. You know, it's people. I started jiu-jitsu. I did MMA 8 years ago or 10 years ago, whatever it is, when you still had the gym in Paro. And back then, maybe disillusion or whatever, I thought I wanted to go do MMA. But now, I was saying to my wife, it's something nice that you can do with your kids. Yes. You know, we talked about the kiddies class earlier. You know, you don't. I'd love to get to you know, my kids 5 or 6 or whatever the age is to start the kiddies class, or when they're a little bit older, come with me to the adults class. And it's something you can do with your kids. It's something you can teach your kids. It teaches them discipline. Absolutely. It's something you can do almost at 100% without getting injured.
Exactly.
You know, boxing, you go 100%, you're going to probably get knocked out.
That's why my career stopped with MMA, because I had a fusion, you know, not because of, but all the years of training and punching to the face and that sort of thing. But jiu-jitsu is brilliant. You can do it like, you know, until you're old, and you know, if you get the right partners, that's not going to fight you with ego, you know. That's like we normally have here, Vim and those guys. It's nice, you know. Those guys are over 40 and they're having a ball here, you know. And they can do it for years to come if they manage their injuries well. I mean, I'm managing my injuries. There's no ways I'm getting back. A lot of guys, when they see me, youngsters, they say, when are you getting back into the cage? You can be the #1 heavyweight again. I was like, oh,
you probably could. I mean,
but you know, I don't want to go and get smashed again, and you know, have to like get my nose punched in again. And
even if you win, there's a lot of damage that you've got to take.
Exactly. Yeah. So I've done that. You know, but now, you know, my journey, I want to stay healthy, and I want to keep, you know, be part of the game and see if I can grow the organization and that sort of thing, you know, and make a business out of it. And that's what we all want to, at least, you know, we want to enjoy what we're doing. And it's no point you doing something for money, but you don't enjoy it. So exactly. I enjoy this a lot, you know. So for me, it's awesome. It's not a lot of money, but it's something that I enjoy. I couldn't see myself sitting in any other place working on a, you know, from a 9 to 5.
Yeah, an office job or anything like that.
Definitely not. You know, this is, I could make more money there, but, you know, at the end of the day, this
you
is
won't
what
be happy.
I enjoy. Yeah, and kids will also, you know, it's also the schools that I'm coaching at, not only the gym. I've been since 2000, I've been at the Redhams coaching those kids. I mean, there's kids,
you've got the Bully Stop program, I think that
Bully Stop program. There's kids now they're CEOs of big companies in Europe. that sometimes message me, hey coach, you still remember me? And you know,
Wow.
I used to coach them when they're 4 years old at Redham, you know, from
Yes.
2000, 2001. Even now, a few years ago, you know, this boy was this big, and the next thing I see, I walk in a passage there at Redham, and I see this tall kid, and he's like, hello sir. I was like, oh, you look familiar. And he's like, yes sir, I used to train with you. And I was like, wow, you know, and I could see the face, and I was like, yes. So I think I've touched a lot of lives with this sport, you know, and so like you say now, it's good for your kids, it's good for what you can do, and there's a lot of stuff you can do and gain from it. And specifically, I could see that with those. But you know, when I started, I was young, you know, and I didn't realize this. But now, after 20 bloody years, 22 years in the game, I can see, you know, the footprint it's left.
Yeah, and then the legacy you've
Yeah.
left on people's lives and the impact.
Yes.
And so when you were younger, obviously you started fighting locally. How many fights did you have before you went to the US? Because you were one of the first South Africans. I know a bunch of South Africans have now gone to the US. Don Madge, Driekus, I think Ron Potts went, Soldier Boy went. Champion Dolce is not a South African, but he has a South African background here, fighting at EFC. How many fights did you have before you went to the US, and how did that conversation come about? How did you actually make it from South Africa to the US?
So what I did was, I had those years, you didn't have like today, you have to have amateur fights and then you get your pro license, then you get pro fights. Those years it was pro fights. And so I had 16 professional fights, and I had 2 losses in America. Now, the first I beat a guy called Trevor Prangley, South African, but he was 5th in the UFC at the time.
Yeah, he'd fought in
2005.
UFC prior to your fight and after your fight, I think, yes.
And he was like 5th in the world at the time, you know, was beating a lot of good people, including that other guy that other wrestler, American wrestler also, that he beat, Chael Sonnen.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah, he did beat Chelson in that.
yeah. And he came to Cape Town in 2005, and you know, I think Mark Robinson and those guys were still putting up, and Omar, they were putting up the event at UCT. And I remember them saying, we've got a fight for you against Trevor Prangley. I was like, oh wow, you know, that's a big step. And of course, I was early in my career, I was young.
How old were you at the time?
I was 22.
Wow.
Yeah. But that's before Facebook and before all those things. I mean, Sherdog only came out that time.
Yeah, 2004 or 5 or something. Yeah,
So it
Sherdog.
was-
I remember Sherdog.
And we fought a proper fight in a cage. Everything. Nobody signed my gloves off though, or his gloves, and it was.
Because it's still very limited rules.
We
Okay.
did foot stomps, and the ref was
Yeah.
fine with it. Mark Robinson at the time, you know. So, which also Mark Robinson fought in the UFC years back.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so he was actually the first South African to fight in the UFC. But to get back to Trevor Prangley, so I beat him, and that was a highlight of my career, because I had actually guys from America emailing me, emailing my sister, asking if I want to come and train with him, and that's how I got to train with Randy Couture. Because normally they wouldn't allow. They had a closed group at the time, Team Quest.
Yep.
In not Tampa Bay, just under Alaska. I can't get the. I'll get to the name.
Yeah.
Now. But you know, so what happened was, my sister emailed them and said, you know, Rico fought Trevor Prangley and he beat Trevor Prangley, and he'd like to come and train with you guys. And they responded immediately back saying, wow, Trevor beat one of our guys, Matt Horwich. So we would love Rico to come and train you.
Wow.
And then they said, we won't charge you. You just need to get here and pay for your accommodation and that sort of thing. So that's what I did. So I went 4 months. I trained 4 months, and then the guy I trained with, Jay White, he got injured. But he was scheduled to fight at Rumble, the Rose Garden 11, against a guy called, I can't even remember the names of everybody now. This is 2005, Devon Cole. And he got injured. Me and him were training, and then he got injured in his knee while we're training, and he was like, Rico, please take my spot.
Wow.
I was like, wow, and I got this, you know, the opportunity to fight in a ring again. It was the International Fight League at that time. And so I fought against Devon Cole, who was also like very good, very, very good. And I went 3 rounds with him. and the distance. But I mean, he couldn't do anything to me. I couldn't do anything to him. But he was an American wrestler guy, little bit better wrestling than me. So he took me down once, and you know, he won the fight with I think it was unanimous decision or split decision. I can't remember. But it wasn't like a, you know. And then I also had another fight in America where I got knocked out. So that was one of those hard fights to, you know. It was. People say, "Yeah, was that your toughest fight?" I'm like, no, it's not my toughest fight because I got knocked out in 20 seconds. My toughest fight was Trevor Prangley. You know, I didn't even feel. I went in and but I know what I did wrong in that second fight. I rushed in. You know, I shouldn't have rushed in. And these guys were like seriously big, strong Division 1 wrestlers, different wrestlers than South African wrestlers. You know, what I mean? And but any case, yeah. So after my fight in 2005, I came back to South Africa and obviously carried on fighting in organizations here, not the EFC. EFC only came in 2009, I think.
Yeah, 8 or 9, I think it was. Yeah.
So we had different organizations here. Durban, you know, I had a lot of fights in Durban in the ring under Larry Foster and a few other guys that I can't even remember the tournaments and the names and organizations. But I got their belts, and you know, I was undefeated in South Africa.
Yeah.
I was only defeated in America. In 2008, I got invited to go and fight in XFC.
Yes.
An XFC in America, and that's when I got knocked out in Tampa Bay, Florida. Yeah. So, but I mean, I came back and I fought again. I fought Jake Ells, but then I had my neck injury. So 2011.
What caused the neck injury? What was it?
I think it was years of wrestling, years of fighting, years maybe
just constant trauma.
Yeah.
Or okay.
And I used to do like a really cruel neck regime called Scorpions, where we would put your head on the ground, jump over and run around.
Like the Russian wrestlers.
Yes, I used to do that, and I was heavyweight, you know, I was always 110 kilograms plus. And
was it worth it? I mean, it made you, I'm sure it made your neck stronger.
My neck at one stage was like thicker than my head, but you know, it's just not really, I mean.
The long-term effects are.
I wouldn't do that today. I wouldn't coach my guys or tell them to do that, you know. So that's the trial and error that I've learned. But yeah, I mean, you know, I came back, I did well, but obviously with this neck, you know, I had to get the fusion because I almost lost my right tricep.
Sure.
And normally I went to 7 neurosurgeons for opinions, and they all said, you got to get this because you're going to lose all your muscle and your strength.
What year was that? About 2008?
2011.
11, okay.
2011, yeah.
So why was there not an opportunity to stay in the US? Did you not want to stay in the US, or?
Yeah, I wanted to stay there, but you know, everything was here, my school, you know, at that time it wasn't, you know, it wasn't big. It wasn't like today. You can make money. I mean, I got $900 for a fight that time. You know,
wow.
I spent all that money staying in a hotel. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it wasn't big those years. It wasn't. It was before people always told me, they say, you know, if you fought Prangley now today and you beat him, and he was where he was at that time, you would have been the highlight of the UFC. You know what I mean? It was. But there wasn't Facebook. Nobody knows about it. It was, yeah. So I was a little bit, you know,
it's just the time, you know. I mean, I think if you like you say, if you had fought today, even without Trevor Prangley, I think just with the record, the dominance you had in South Africa, I think you would have at the very least had a shot at a Bellator or a, you know, UFC kind of thing. So, you know, you didn't have the sort of the tools now to or the opportunities, let me rather say, that many people have now. So we've got a young guy in our gym that you know, and I remember at the last grading you said, you know, you believe he can go far in jiu-jitsu or MMA, I think, whatever he chooses. I know he's dedicated, he's here most days, almost for the whole day. What would be sort of, I mean, I'm sure you've given him advice already to make it, but what would be your advice to people now, given that there's all these opportunities out there? I just said to him, not that I'm the person to be giving advice, but I just thought I would think, you know, having yourself as a brand would be the first thing. Of course, your skills and everything, but what in your mind would be the most important things for a young up-and-coming guy that wants to make it to UFC from South Africa?
I think, like you say, you know, get yourself out there, because it's very difficult for South African to make your name, especially from, you know, we're sitting at the backside of the world, but you know, to also another thing that I saw over the years is guys jumping teams. You know, they jump teams and then they get the wrong, especially if they are gullible. They listen to everybody. There's too many cooks in the kitchen. And that's when the mistakes happen and things like that. So I would say, if you're with a good team, stick with the team, unless you really need to move, and maybe
or something's toxic or whatever.
Or something's not right, or you want to go to America where it's a little bit, and that's a different story. But other than that, stick to your team. I always give the example of a graph. People, when it doesn't go their way, it goes like this. And then they start something, it goes well, and then it goes like this. Then they start something again elsewhere, and then it goes like this. So instead of just staying with it and forming a nice curve, eventually you will go up. It's like investment strategy. So, but that's the one thing I would advise youngsters today that wanna. If you've got a good team, stick with them. Listen to your coaches. Don't listen to many, because as you get better. And as you start winning competitions, I've also seen then the head starts growing too big, and they think, they become arrogant, and then they think they know it all, and they think they can do better, and then
a lot of yes men
first,
come and
then sponsors come first before the training, and I've seen that so many times. And I think it's just they must just. As they get better and as start winning competitions, they must remember where they come from. They must remember, they must stay humble.
Yeah, remember who got you there.
Stay humble, and don't get arrogant. Because life is unpredictable. You can go from hero to zero and vice versa very quickly. So that's that would be my advice to a youngster. And I know Andrew as well. Andrew, I think he's got his mindset right, but he's still young and he needs guidance as well.
For sure.
And we're giving him that guidance. We like his little family here. Not that he hasn't got family, but I mean he loves what he's doing, and we're supporting him.
And he's so young already, putting the work in. I mean,
he can go far. I mean, but again, I've seen it. As if they start to get arrogant, and then it all goes pear shaped. And I've seen it so many times. And then they need to come back to earth again. They need to be humble again before they can start growing. Nobody can, and I know if you look at Conor McGregor and those guys, they've made a name for themselves. They seem arrogant,
brash,
and stuff like that. Yes, I don't always agree with that, but I think it was. Besides the fact that was arrogant, I don't think necessarily he was arrogant. I think he was really.
It's a persona.
Yeah, I think he was really focused, and I think if he was so arrogant, he would have, and maybe he made mistakes, because that's life. You make mistakes, you come back to earth. But I do believe that that was for the show. And,
for sure.
And he did a really good job. But a lot of people can't do that. They're either arrogant and they like that and they start losing. I've seen it so many times. So yeah, that's my advice to youngsters today. Stick with your team. Don't get a big head. Stay humble. No matter if you start winning, and keep on winning. Don't base your if you win, don't base it on ego. Make sure that, and that's something I always tell my guys as well, and I've told Andrew that as well. You're not going to fight for the rest of your life. Fighting is a very small part of life. So make sure that you have other things that you can put your energy into if you cannot fight anymore. So for me, it was the school. I mean, I'm not and I knew when to stop as well. But now I wasn't like this sad journeyman that didn't have any money and had to go and fight and get knocked out the whole time just
because he had nothing else. Yeah.
I prepared something on the side for myself to do if I couldn't fight, because my fighting, I didn't fight for ego. I fought because I loved the sport, the art.
I think you weren't. I mean, did you even some fights not get paid at all, or very little? Yeah. So it just shows how much it was for the love of it.
We did everything. We paid everything to go up there. It was for the sport, and of course, when you're young, you've got that. You want to learn about yourself, And one guy actually put it in a nice way. He said, one guy from Joburg, I think it was Driekus' coach that time, Mona, he said, the youngsters today, they don't have the army anymore. So they want to do these, it's still in their genes. They want to, you know what I mean? They want to do something. They want to prove that they worth somewhere, and this is a good way of being part of a jiu-jitsu club or MMA club or fight club. But I believe not for the wrong reasons. You must have guidance, especially when you're young. You can do it for the wrong reasons if you have the bad mental. So I think we good mentors, we good support for these
No,
guys.
for sure.
Yeah,
Definitely.
And if there's bad mentors or bad guidance, it will sort itself out. I mean, there's no room for that here.
Oh yeah, no, very quickly.
Yeah.
That's something you very quickly learn when you go to martial arts, and because people are, again, like you say, no egos.
Yeah.
And that mentorship, I think over the years you've been a mentor to a lot of champions.
Yeah.
You got your black belt a couple of years ago. What are some of the names, maybe for the people that don't know, of champions that you've coached, maybe in MMA, black belts that you've given? I know of a couple, and there are still a couple, I'm sure, coming in the next couple of years. We've got some very high level and good brown belts here.
Yes.
What are some of the names, or maybe some of the people that you've mentored over the years, and champions and black belts? And
So I started with, we had quite a good group of guys when we were in Paro Gym 2011-12, when I was still very much involved in that sort of thing. And I started with a guy called Gideon Drotsky.
Yeah, remember
He's
Gideon,
still here with us, Hermie. He started with me in my mom's garage, in 2010, and it took him 2 years, and he became the EFC light heavyweight champ.
wow,
He fought Dani van Heerden. He fought a few guys, and he beat them all. He fought Dani van Heerden. We got Jack Paro to
I remember
dance
that
early,
entrance. Yeah.
because we were training in Paro, and
Yeah.
so I thought it was a nice move. Even Cairo from EFC he phoned me and said, "Rico, that's a nice move."
Yeah.
You were thinking good there. So that's the guy that I've mentored. Obviously, had some things in his life, and everybody goes through things, and but I think up until what I've done, and the way that I've mentored him was good, and he really learned a lot, but in a humble way. He was never really, and I always really try to keep my guys humble, don't go to the left or too far to the right, stay in the middle. And then also Luke Michael
Yep.
started with me, very good career.
Just recently won the
Yeah.
EFC title.
He won the EFC title. And he started with me. He was like a skinny boy in Paro. He was like, he didn't know anything.
As a kid.
Yeah, he was a kid, and he saw a few things. I think he trained with Paul Cave at the time or something. I can't remember, but we said, okay, Luke, if you want to fight, and he had the determination that Andrew's got. Said, Luke, if you want to fight, you got to be on top. You got to do this. You got to have your wrestling, and he was just listening, and he was just learning, and he was just doing it and following it, and. So yeah, it was good. That was one of the guys that I also I think mentored, and I guided and helped a lot. A lot of outside influences messed it up.
Yeah, because he's not training
times.
anymore.
Yeah, it was a lot of outside influences, guys that were really good with the mouth, and I'm one of those guys that people always say, Rico, you were right, because I can just see it from a mile away where nobody can see it. I can just see through it. And but I don't say anything about it. I just keep quiet and I do my own thing and that sort of thing. And I could see that outside influences was not very good. And they would know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to disclose it here, everything.
No, for sure. No,
that sort of thing.
Don't.
But yeah, that was toxic in my opinion. And and then a few other guys that I also. Black belts, I gave Sean Foss a black belt under order of Roberto, of course. I didn't do anything just because Roberto. Johan Oosthuizen was with us, so I gave him the black belt because Roberto couldn't come down and he had to, or we thought it was time for him to get his black belt. So we gave him the black belt. Francois Groenewald, we gave the black belt to, so there's quite a few guys that
Sean Otto, I think, as
Johan
well.
Otto as well, which has been training with me since 11 years of age. He was also with Ludwig, a very youngster.
Absolute machine.
Yeah,
Sure.
machine, yeah.
Yeah.
And then some other guys, that's about it. I mean, Hermie,
There's a couple, I'm sure, in the next couple of years,
I'm looking forward to great Hermie. He's been somebody who's really been sticking it out with me, and he's really shown loyalty. That guy, I can really say that.
And he's an awesome coach as well for us. I mean,
very, very much so.
Yeah.
And he's open and he's humble and he's not, But yeah, I mean, in America, I remember there was a few guys that I also. There was Sokuju.
yeah, so could you?
Yeah, I was. Yeah. So Sokuju, I was training with Dan Henderson in 2009, 2008. then I fought and came back in 2009. I trained, and they called me and they said, Sokuju said, Rico, I'd like you, because he's such a nice guy, and we were like training together, and he said, I'd like you to be my sparring partner for my next fight coming up against Gegard Musashi.
Yeah?
I was like, oh, I'm there. So I flew up, stayed there with the guys, trained with them, was in his corner where Fedor fought that other guy, I can't remember his name. He knocked that guy out, a big black guy that he fought.
Kevin Randleman
no. It was
Quentin Rampage.
No, it was another guy that was up and coming. But anyways, he was the main card.
Bob Sapp?
Not Bob Sapp. No.
Okay.
Brett Rogers.
Okay, yeah, Brett Rogers, yeah.
So that was the main event, and I was in Sokuju's corner, and see, we were preparing him nicely. But I know why he asked me, because I was really, I could take him down and I could control him on the ground. And he said to me, Rico, even at Team Quest at the time, he said, I'd like you to come, because you've got this great ability to control, and I'd like you to prepare and help me with it. So that was one of the guys that I helped that asked me. And then obviously, after my neck injury, everything got up. Back in South Africa, just coaching, focusing on the gym here now. I had a patch also where I didn't have any fighters, and COVID obviously came, and it was, But to me also, it's, like I say, it's not about, for me it's about, enjoying it, the art. I don't have to have fighters and ego and fights and have to win and things like that. For me, it's fine. I enjoy my journey, and I enjoy the guys that wants to take the journey with me, and that sort of thing. But I think there's going to be a couple coming through the
with the kiddies.
Soon. With the kiddies, and
for sure.
I think Andrew as well.
Before
guys,
them.
Academy, and so, but especially Andrew. I think Andrew he's got it. He just needs to have the right guidance, not necessarily the right training as well. But the right guidance is very important for a youngster. Like I said earlier, I can't highlight that enough.
Yeah, we've got a good community here as well. Other than just the training, it's a good community. Like you said, the morning guys. Guys like Vim, there's Fani. There's a lot of good guys that have walked that road before. And then of course, you probably the best person to guide somebody, I think, into an MMA career for sure in South Africa. Lastly, I just want to know if you got any, any further message just for everybody listening, if there's anything else, any last words before we go.
Look, I would just say, times have changed so much, and it's jiu-jitsu and MMA is growing massively, as you can see. And if you want to, especially for the younger guys and the guys who's training with us, the guys who's listening and who's keen, who's still listening at that point. So
hopefully,
if you're really keen on doing something, I believe, stick with it. I've seen many guys train and do well, and then all of a sudden just drop out, and I never saw them again. And I know why that is, because they built their success on ego. So the day they couldn't do it anymore, or the day they lost, or the hype there was so much pressure on themselves to perform that they based it on, I have to perform in front of these people, otherwise I'm nothing. And that is something that people, and my students and people who train with me, I don't want you to ever feel that way. I want you to enjoy. There's going to be days where you're going to lose. Even if you compete, you're going to lose. Everybody's going to lose, but try and think past that and try and enjoy the journey. I was also young, and I also were only thinking about fighting, but like I said earlier, fighting and that sort of thing is a small part of life. Jiu-jitsu, on the other hand, is a healthier option for going forward, doing it for the long run. It's nice to tap out somebody, and it's nice to see if you can beat this guy and that guy, and but don't ever feel that you frustrated, or don't ever feel that you're not worth anything, or you don't want to do it anymore because now the pressure is too much. When it gets to that, rather stop. Otherwise, make sure that you enjoy the journey. don't put too much pressure on yourself. Enjoy the journey, enjoy the fitness journey, enjoy the learning of the art, and if you want to do that sort of thing. So that's what I want to say to the guys. I'm not somebody with a lot of words, but
no, I mean, yeah, no, I think
I
I understand 100% what you're saying.
Yeah.
I think also it's a big thing as maybe a take-home message is just the egos, not to maybe put all your self-worth into something. I previously did bodybuilding, where I think a lot of people before a show feel, oh, I look the best I've ever looked, I'm amazing, my training, everything, feel amazing, on top of the world. Get to a show and don't win, and because they didn't get that first place, now all of a sudden all their self-worth is put into that. Now it's like, oh no, I look like crap, and when before you were on top of the world and now you've lost. So I think it's a very important message to learn. Well, Rico, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Coach, appreciate it. Yeah,
you're welcome.
I know you're very busy, so I really appreciate the time, and hopefully we can do this again in the future.
Definitely, 100%. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Cheers.
Okay.